Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Shut Up and Read. Today I'll be doing the book haul video for the month of March. I know this video is incredibly late, it is already mid-April, but I have a ton of books to get through today, so let's just get right into it. The first pile of books I want to go through today are from Book Outlet. The first book is Death of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. This is a YA fantasy novel that's set in the kingdom of Remnants. It follows an outlaw of some sort as well as a legendary street thief. Somehow the two of them meet and there's a cat and mouse game ensues, and I'm just really intrigued by this book and I've heard really good things about it, so definitely can't wait to pick this up soon. The next two books that I got are Book 4 and Book 5 of the Fallen Kingdom series. This is Crystal Storm and this is Frozen Tides. I believe I'm only missing Book 2 as of right now, and of course it just follows a series, so I don't really want to go into details because one, I haven't read the first book yet, and also because this is a sequel and I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm really excited for it. Everyone seems to really love Fallen Kingdom, so I'm definitely cannot wait to read this soon once I get book 2 though. The next two books that I got are books 2 and books 3 of the Half-Blood trilogy. This is Half Lost and Half Wild. This is books 2 and books 3. I am only missing the first book right now because that one was not available on Book Outlet, but I figured I'd just pick up the second and third book and then I would just purchase the first book later. So this book is set in modern day England where there are some sort of like two factions of like witches and they are against each other for some time now. And the book follows a boy called Nathan who is an abomination of some sort apparently because he is the illegitimate son of one of like the most terrifying witches of all time, and that he has to go after his father right now to basically receive his magical powers before it's too late, and he has like no one to trust. So that's essentially what the series is about. But I have been trying to read this series for the longest time and I've been trying to get a hold of them, so I'm finally glad to get books 2 and books 3 and I just had to get book 1. Then the next two books that I got are once again books 2 and books 3 of the Remnant Chronicles. This is The Beauty of Darkness and this is The Heart of Betrayal. Apparently Book Outlet was not selling the first book of any of these series, and so I just decided to get a bunch of the second and third books, and hopefully I'll just find the first book sometime soon. So this is actually the original series before Dance of Thieves came out. Dance of Thieves is actually a spin-off series that follows a new cast of characters, but this is the original series and I have been trying to read these books for a very long time as well. So the series follows a princess who's supposed to have the gift of sight but she didn't, and then her parents decided to put on some sort of sham and basically forge an alliance between her and a prince of a neighboring kingdom, and then she decides to run away. And she's settling into her new life when these like two mysterious and handsome strangers appear, not knowing that one of them is the jilted prince that she was supposed to marry and the other one was an assassin that was sent to kill her. And this whole thing like starts to happen, and there's like deception obviously, and supposed to fall in love, and I don't know, this book just sounds so good. And I have books 2 and books 3 here, so now I need to find the first book as always apparently. The next book that I got is Honor Among Thieves by Rachel Caine and Anne Aguirre. I hope I pronounced her last name correctly. This is a YA sci-fi novel. So this book follows a girl called Zara who somehow committed a crime and now she's running for her life. But instead of going to jail, which is where she thought she was going to be, she somehow gets recruited to become an Honor, which is an elite team that is somehow recruited by this Leviathan, which apparently is a race of sentient alien spaceships. And I recently read a book where it features a sentient spaceship as well, and I love that book so much. So I saw that and that immediately piqued my interest. So she basically partners up with this alien spaceship and they go off to explore the galaxy. But unfortunately there are some dark and ominous truths lying behind the background, and this book seems fascinating. I've loved Rachel Caine's other books as well as Anne Aguirre's other books as well, so I have pretty high hopes for this one. The next book that I got is actually from a publicity agency, and that is The Tesla Legacy by K.K. Perez. This book sounds absolutely fascinating. It follows a girl called Lucy who has some sort of like fateful encounter with a Tesla suite in New York City where it basically unlocks her ability to manipulate electricity, and now she's struggling to control her newfound powers as well as being thrust into a centuries-old battle between these two rival societies. But the biggest downside to this whole situation is the fact that carriers of Lucy's genetic mutation, including Nikola Tesla, all lose their mind and they die. So anyways, I'm just really excited for this book. I just like the fact that there's like Tesla involved somehow, and Tesla's a big thing these days, and somehow just the idea of being able to control and manipulate electricity just sounds really fascinating, so very excited for this one. The next 3 books that I got are from my book of the month picks. The first one is Opposite of Always by Justin A. Reynolds. I am so excited for this book because everyone who has read it has been raving about it non-stop. It follows 2 teenagers, one called Jack and the one called Kate. They meet at this party and they basically fall in love. However, instead of your typical falling in love happily ever after story, something goes wrong because Kate dies. And rather than having the love story end there, somehow her death sends Jack back to the beginning of when he first met Kate. And now he has a chance to basically somehow prevent her death from happening. And I believe this happens like over and over again until at some point he finds out that his actions has consequences, and he finds out that this consequence might be a deadly one and it might end up sacrificing another person that he loves. So now he has to figure out who to sacrifice and what he's willing to do. So this book kind of reminds me of Russian Doll just because of the whole, you know, repeating the cycle over and over again and just trying to figure out and solve this problem. But of course that one has like no romance, but I think the general kind of scheme is kind of similar. But I don't know, I just saw the summary and I was like, oh, Russian Dolls. But anyways, I'm just really excited for this book. A lot of people have been raving about it, so definitely cannot wait to see what the hype is about. So the next book that I got from Book of the Month is of course Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I should probably read this as soon as possible actually because everyone has read it and they have been raving about this. The only complaint I guess I've heard about this book so far is the beginning and that it's not that interesting, but I've also heard the complete opposite, so maybe it's just based on personal preference. And regardless, so I'm very excited about this. So this book follows the fact that there's Daisy Jones and the Six. They're a very, very famous band, and they basically define the rock and roll era of the late 70s. And then one day they have their big concert at the Chicago Stadium. What is it, on July 12th, 1979, and the group split, and no one knows why until now. So this book, I guess, just chronicles like the beginning of prior to Daisy Jones and the Six, and it kind of goes in details about like maybe their history and the kind of events leading up to the eventual split. At least that's what I think. I don't actually know because I haven't been reading too many spoilers, thank God, but we'll see, guys. I mean, this book, I've heard really good things. I've also heard some negative stuff just in the beginning of the book though, so regardless, I'm very excited for this one. The last book that I got from Book of the Month is looks so good honestly, and that is Before She Knew Him by Peter Swanson. I've recently been in a really big mood to just get a lot of mystery thriller novels. I don't know why, because usually I'm not in the mood for those, but for whatever reason, maybe my Instagram have just been all about that, and I've just been in the mood just because of, you know, the hype given to all these like thriller mystery novels. But I saw this book and I was immediately sucked into the story. This book follows a woman called Henrietta and her husband. They live in this suburban house outside of Boston, and she basically has now finally managed to control her bipolar disorder. And then one day they end up meeting the couple next door. I don't know if it's like a new couple or something like that, but they end up meeting the couple next door, and the tranquility and the relief that she has found from the right meds to control her bipolar disorder is starting to erode when she finds this kind of mysterious object, or like a familiar object, in the husband's study. And apparently this object looks very similar to this unsolved killing that happened years prior. And she recognizes this object because she has this fascination with this unsolved mystery. So now she basically believes that perhaps her neighbor, I believe his name is Matthew or something, could be the killer. But the thing is, she doesn't know if she's correct in suspecting Matthew, or if this is another psychotic episode that happened, something similar to happen to her like way back when. But the thing is, the more she observes him, the more she believes that he is truly planning something terrifying. And then I guess he is onto her, and now she is in some sort of nightmare. And I am just so intrigued by the synopsis. This book sounds so fascinating, and I'm just very excited for this one. The next three books that I got were actually from the Barnes & Noble book outlet, like book haul deal. So I actually went back there and got some more books because I couldn't resist. But the first book that I got is The Room on Rue Emily by Kristen Harmel. I'm also in the mood for whatever reason for historical fiction, so when I saw this book, this sounds fascinating, and it's supposed to be set in World War II. It follows a woman called Ruby Henderson and Benoit. She's a newlywed, and she arrived in Paris in 1939. And at first, everything was bliss with her new husband, but war is on the horizon, and France falls to the Nazi, and her marriage starts to splinter. And her neighbor, 11-year-old Charlotte, tries to stay hopeful despite the fact that the occupation is threatening to tear her Jewish family apart. And somehow there's also this like British pilot that somehow ends up there. His name is Thomas Clark, and he finds and discovers a new reason to keep on living. And together, Ruby, Charlotte, and Thomas must somehow summon the courage to defeat the Nazi as well as heal the broken hearts. So obviously, I believe there's going to be some sort of romance thing between Ruby and Thomas, just because that's the understanding that I'm getting from this book right now. But I don't know, I've heard really good things about this book, and this cover looks amazing, so I'm very excited for this one. Then the next book that I got from the Barnes & Noble sale is The Witch of Willa Hall by Hester Fox. This book is set in the 1800s. It follows a family. They're called the Montrose family and their three daughters, where they have to flee from Boston to their country home, Willa Hall. And from there, things start to happen. There's some sort of dark history lurking in the background. There's also some sort of subtle menace in the atmosphere, and all three daughters are changed drastically. basically. There's obviously some sort of like powers involved as well, and I don't know, but this book just sounds really, really fascinating. It deals with like magic, it deals with historical fiction, I guess, and so both of them combined just made me very intrigued for this book. Then the last book that I got from the Barnes & Noble sale was A Danger to Herself and Others by Lisa Scheinmel. I hope I pronounced that last name correctly. So this book follows a girl called Hannah who is institutionalized, but she believes that there has been some sort of mistake. What happened to her roommate at that summer program was an accident and not really her fault. So she's just basically waiting for the doctors and nurses to figure out that she's not a danger to herself or to others, and for her to be sent home as soon as possible to start her senior year. But then Lucy arrives, and of course she has her own baggage, but she might also be the only one to basically have Hannah confront the secrets that she's been avoiding. So I am actually really intrigued by this because I'm kind of curious to find out what is the reason, like what happened to her roommate that summer camp, and what is the secrets that she's avoiding to make her become institutionalized. And there's definitely some secrets to be found here, and I'm very intrigued. The next few books that I got are from publishers. The first one is You Must Not Miss by Katrina Leno. This book sounds really, really dark and really intense actually. It follows a girl called Magpie who's been writing her journal ever since shit went down. And basically her older sister basically left town and left Magpie to fend for herself, and that was also the day or the night of this party. And now Magpie is called a slut, her former best friend won't talk to her, and she's just basically a social outcast at this point. So she retreats to her journal and basically making up a place called Near. And Near is perfect, where her life is perfect, everything is perfect, and she writes this place so vividly that it comes to life in her own backyard. And it's a place where she can have anything that she wants, including revenge. So I am just so intrigued by the concept. It says here that's supposed to be like for fans of One of Us is Lime, which I really adored, and Carrie, which I watched the movie and I liked as well. So I'm kind of intrigued to see what a mix of that will be like, and this has definitely piqued my interest. The next two books I got are retellings actually, which I'm so excited for. The first one is Stepsister, which is a retelling of not Cinderella but one of the stepsisters, and the other one is The Surface Breaks, and this one is supposed to be a retelling of The Little Mermaid, and both just sounds so fascinating. I love retellings if you don't know already, and both of these are just classic retellings that I'm very interested in. The next book that I got just looks so adorable, and that is I Love You So Muchi by Sarah Kuhn. And this book just sounds so cute. His cover is absolutely adorable. It follows a girl. Her name is Kimi, and she is doing her own thing. Apparently she loves a good fashion statement, and her mother disapproves, and basically her life right now is kind of in a mess. And then one day her grandmother, like her estranged grandmother, sends her a letter inviting her to go to Kyoto. So she decides to seize the opportunity to escape the disaster that is her life. And then she arrives in Japan, in Kyoto, and she meets a guy called Akira. So the book just continues, and she learns more about her mother from her estranged grandmother, of course. She falls in love with the custom, eating all the mochi apparently, which I approve because mochi is delicious. And I guess the purpose of this book really is just to find out like where her own heart lies, as well as kind of mend her relationship with her mother. And I'm very intrigued by this book because the cover is gorgeous. I love mochi. I mean, who doesn't love mochi, right? And that's obviously the purpose of this book, guys, but I'm just very intrigued by this book. The next two books that I got are actually from a fellow bookstagrammer. She kindly sent them over to me, so thank you so much. And for those who haven't followed me on Instagram, you guys should follow me on Instagram because why not? But anyways, the two books I got from her were Echo North by Joanna Ruth Mayer, as well as What We Buried by Kate A. Borman. So this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, which I have read one recently, which is A Curse So Dark and Lonely, which I absolutely adored. So I'm definitely curious to see how this author would change this classic and make it into her own story. And this book, on the other hand, is a psychological thriller novel. It follows two siblings. I believe their names are Liv and Jory. Yeah, Liv and Jory. And this road trip initially started off really nice, very simple, great road trip, and then they start to unearth some of their family secrets. So both books sounds absolutely fascinating. They're both very different. One's a fairy tale retelling and the other one's like a psychological thriller, suspense kind of novel, and both sounds absolutely incredible. So very intrigued by the two of them. Then the next two books I got are also from publishers. The first one is Kingsbane by Claire Legrand. This is book 2 of the Imperium trilogy. I am so excited for this book. This is the sequel for Fury Born. And this book just takes place right after the events of the first book, so I don't want to say anything, I don't want to spoil anything. But the first book basically follows two queens that are separated by 1,000 years. And I'm just very excited and definitely cannot wait to pick this one up as soon as possible. Then the other book that I got from the publisher is The Stormcrow by Kaylin Josephson. This is one of my most highly anticipated reads of 2019, and I'm so excited that I got a copy of the arc and cannot wait to dive right into this book as soon as possible. This book follows a fallen princess who basically ignites a rebellion to take back the magical elemental crows that were taken from her people. And elemental crows just sound so fascinating. Anything with crows these days just sound really intense to me. I don't know why. And also, like, based on the black here, it's supposed to say Aragon meets Anna Darkin. I loved Aragon back when I read that in high school. I haven't read it since then, but I loved that series way back when, and I haven't gotten a chance to read Anna Darkin yet, but I've heard really good things about it, and it's definitely high on my to be read list, so very intrigued on that as well. But I'm definitely curious to see how this book will kind of be a mesh between both series, I guess. And regardless though, I'm so intrigued and definitely cannot wait to pick this up as soon as possible. Then the next few books that I got were from Book Outlet. The first one is This Cruel Design by Emily Savada. Hoping I pronounced that last name correctly. This is book 2 of the Mortal Coil series, which I have gotten a past few months ago, but I haven't picked it up yet. But I've heard really good things about the series, so I figured why not. So this is obviously a sequel, so I won't really talk about this book, but the series basically follows the fact that at this point in time, humans now have this ability to basically recode their DNA, which means that they can actually change their bodies to however they want it to change. And there's also supposed to be some sort of play, and it kind of follows that. And I'm so intrigued by that concept, by the way, but I'm so excited for this book because this book just sounds really amazing. It sounds very unique. It's a sci-fi. I haven't read that much like good sci-fi, like sci-fi these days. I feel like the sci-fi books I've read recently are more like in space sci-fi-ish. So definitely interested in this book. Then the next book that I got is Genesis by Brandon Reichs. This is book 2 of the Nemesis trilogy, I believe. And again, I'm not going to talk too much about this book because this is a sequel, but the first book was really complicated. I haven't read it yet. I got it a while ago, but I believe it follows like 3 types of like storyline. The first one is about a girl who somehow is killed again and again, but like hours later she'll wake up like there's no evidence of anything. And then it also follows a guy called Noah who's like someone dealing with like plague and destructions. And then on the third side there's some sort of like asteroid and something about that as well. So it's kind of vague, but I just remember it was like a really complicated looking plot and it sounds so intriguing. So very excited to pick this one up as soon as possible. The next book that I got is another thriller mystery novel. Like I said, I'm very in the mood for thriller mysteries these days, and this one is The Death of Mrs Westaway by Ruth Ware. I actually saw this book way back when during Book Expo last year, and the line for this was insane. It was just so long, and obviously after that I was kind of intrigued to say like why this book was just so popular, etc. And this book just sounds really interesting. It follows a woman, I believe her name is Harriet Westaway. She receives like this mysterious letter saying that her grandmother or like her grandparents had bequeathed some sort of like inheritance to her, but she knows that there's some sort of mistake because her grandparents had died like over 20 years ago. But the thing is, the bills are piling up and she's basically run out of options. So she decides to go and kind of see what is going on with this inheritance. And then she finds herself in the sprawling estate in the English countryside where the rest of the family of this grandmother or grandparent they're coming over to pay their respect as well as claim their own inheritance. And it doesn't take long for her to realize that there's something very wrong about the situation, and the inheritance is in the center of it. So anyways, this book just sounds very gripping, very intense as well, and I'm definitely curious to see like what exactly is going on, what is very wrong in the situation, what kind of situation did she find herself in, etc. So very excited to actually pick this up as soon as possible. The next book that I got is actually one that I got because I keep hearing Reagan talking about it for the past few months. She's been like raving about this series in general. So I was kind of like, okay, well let me just pick it up and see for myself. This one is called Keeper of the Lost Cities by Samantha Messenger. This is a middle grade novel and it follows a girl called Sophie who's a telepath, which basically just means she can hear the thoughts of everyone around her. Then one day this mysterious guy appears who can also read minds. She also decides that her staying there will actually put her family in danger and she is basically forced to leave. So she's basically just starting a new life in this very new place. I want to say there's also like elves in here as well. Like I believe that's what Reagan had mentioned many times, that there's like she's an elf actually. And so I'm kind of curious to see how and where this story will take me, but she has been loving the series like no other. She's been very dedicated on reading it, so we'll see. It kind of gives me like kind of like Harry Potter vibes in the sense that like, you know, he got some like destiny and then he goes off to this mysterious like magical school, Hogwarts obviously, and something similar along lines for her as well, where she also goes off to this like magical school, magical world as well. And I definitely see some similarities, so we'll see. We'll see how this book goes. Then the next book that I got is The Geography of Lost Things by Jessica Brody. This sounds so adorable. This is a YA contemporary novel. So this book follows the fact that there's a road trip involved somewhere between this girl and her ex-boyfriend, and they're basically driving this car to this buyer like 300 miles away so she can sell the car. And so I guess along the road trip she discovers all these things about her dead father, etc. And I'm just very curious to see where this book will take me. I mean, this book sounds adorable, so we'll see. Then the next book that I got is Tessa the Road by Rachel Hartman. This book takes place in the medieval kingdom of Gored, where women are expected to be ladies and men to be their providers and protectors. But Tess is different, and one day she does something where I guess she is basically shunned from everyone around her, and her family decides that the only path for her right now is the nunnery. But on the day that she was supposed to join the nuns, she chooses a different path for herself. She cuts off her hair, she puts on these boots, and she basically sets off for a journey. So this book just kind of seems like a feminism kind of novel, like trying to find yourself, like being true to yourself, etc. And I'm definitely curious to see where this book will lead me. I've heard some mixed reviews about this book, so we'll see. But I think the concept of it does sound really interesting, so I'll definitely find out for myself when I pick it up. The next book that I got is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. This book follows a girl called Isabel, who is a prodigy portrait artist who has a very unique set of clients. She basically caters towards the immortal fae folk. But then when she receives her first royal patron, I believe his name is Rook, the Autumn Prince, she makes a huge mistake because she accidentally paints mortal sorrow into his eyes, which apparently is a weakness that can cost him his life. And of course, he is furious and he spirits her away to basically pay for her terrible crime. But something is terribly wrong in his world and they are attacked on every side. So now they're forced to depend on each other, and basically like love might even blossom, which I'm actually really intrigued by this book because it's giving me kind of like Wicked King or Cruel Prince kind of vibes, just because of the whole like fae and human and the forbidden romance and him being kind of cruel, etc. At least that's what I'm imagining him to be kind of cruel, because he doesn't seem to be a nice guy if like what she made was a very innocent mistake, I guess. But anyways, I'm very intrigued by this book, so we'll see. The next book that I got is The Traitors Kiss by Erin Beatty. This book follows a obstinate girl who would not marry, a soldier who is trying to prove himself, and a kingdom that is on the brink of war. So I'm just kind of curious to see where this book will lead me, because I actually haven't heard too much about this book, but when I saw this and the cover is gorgeous, I was kind of intrigued by it and very curious by it. The next book that I got was from the mail, but I'm not really sure where it came from, to be honest, and that is Smoke and Summons by Charlie N. Holmberg. And this book sounds actually really interesting because it's supposed to be, it kind of is giving me like genie vibes or like djinn vibes in some ways, because it says over here that Sandis is a human vessel for an ancient spirit, and at the command of her master she can transform at will. And for whatever reason she ends up running away from her master, and then she meets this guy, I guess his name is Roan, who owns this like rare device where he can basically make himself turn immortal for 1 minute once a day. So I don't know, the concept of it does seem very like complex, and I'm not really sure I fully understand it, but it seems like it'll be kind of interesting, so we'll see. I really don't know where this book came from, and I've never even heard of it before, so very curious. The next book that I got, I'm also not entirely sure where I got this from, to be honest. I want to say it's from a publicity agency and they just sent it to me. But anyways, this book is called Someone Knows by Lisa Scotoline. Hoping I pronounced that last name correctly. This is another mystery/thriller novel. This book follows a woman called Allie who's heading home to the funeral of a childhood friend. And apparently going back home, she has like sense of dread because she's actually going to meet up with two of the people who she shares this unbearable secret. 20 years ago, something happened and these 5 teenagers were involved. They kept what happened as a secret because they thought that being caught would be far worse, but Allie now knows that not getting caught is even worse. And now she's trying to figure out like what really happened 20 years ago, and the truth of what happened will shock her and apparently the reader as well. So I'm definitely curious and we'll see. I mean, like I said, I'm definitely in the mood for mystery thriller novels these days, so this will definitely be high on my list to read or binge read. Then the next book that I got is from one of my book boxes, and that is Sherwood by Megan Spooner. This is supposed to be a gender bender for Robin Hood, which I'm so excited for. I also read her other retelling, Beauty and the Beast retelling called Hunted, which I really, really liked, so I actually have pretty high hopes for this one. The next book that I got, I think from Barnes & Noble actually, is Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James, and this book is so heavy. Like, this is definitely the heaviest of all the books I have right now. But anyways, I am just really excited for this book because this has been very buzzed about all over social media. It's supposed to be like one of the most highly anticipated fantasy novels, and a lot of people say that it's supposed to be kind of similar to Game of Thrones, but diverse version because it draws like African history and mythology into it. But the thing is, I've also heard that it's nothing like Game of Thrones, so I really don't know what to expect at this point. And last time someone told me that it's supposed to be like a Game of Thrones, like Descendant of the Crane, and it wasn't, and it was just very disappointing. So I'm kind of want to go into this book without too much knowledge, because I feel like if I go into it knowing too much and hearing the hype and kind of relying on the hype a little more than necessary, then I might end up being disappointed in this book. So we'll see. But as of right now, this is an adult fantasy novel, been buzzed about a lot, and that's all I really want to say about this book. Other than that, I'm going to go into it blank and fresh. So the next two books I got are from my roommate. She works at a poetry magazine, and every single time that they're trying to just clear up space on their bookshelves, she'll send me pictures of me to just kind of go through them and see if there's any books that I want. So I decided to go with two of them because I've seen them a lot on social media. I actually don't really know too much in terms of what they're about, but I figured why not just check them out. So the first one is The Last Romantics by Tara Conklin, I want to say, and another one is All of Us with Wings by Michelle Ruiz-Kell. So both of these are extremely different. This is a adult like contemporary novel. I believe it follows like 4 siblings, and it kind of talks about the epic story of one American family and kind of like what binds us together, etc. And then this one on the other hand is a YA fantasy. At first glance it looks like a contemporary novel because of the cover, but it's actually a fantasy novel, and it's actually a debut novel, and it's set in San Francisco. And basically what happens is that the main character accidentally summons a pair of ancient creatures devoted to avenging the wrongs of her adolescence. So kind of curious to see where this book will take me. So I'm definitely curious about both of these books. I've definitely seen a lot of great reviews about this book already. This one came out in February. This one doesn't come out until June, so I have some time to read this before it actually comes out. But I've just seen this cover a lot and it's gorgeous, so I'm excited for these two books. The next few books that I got are purchases from Barnes & Noble books. I couldn't resist, guys. The first one is Warrior of the Wild by Trisha Levenseller. And for this one, what most intrigued me was this one statement that said, "How do you kill a god?" Because it follows a girl called Rasmira who has been trained all her life to basically lead her village. Also, she is her father's like chosen heir, by the way, so she's supposed to lead this village as a warrior. But then when she does her coming of age trial, it is sabotage and she ends up failing the test. And of course, as all fathers do, he banishes her to a monster-filled wilderness with an impossible quest, and that is to kill the god that has been oppressing this village year after year or die trying. So I'm definitely intrigued by this book because this book sounds fascinating to me, and just the idea of just having to kill a god and this impossible quest, very, very interesting. The next book that I got is Lovely War by Julie Berry. Honestly, I have been eyeing this book purely for the cover because the cover looks so pretty. I just can't get over how pretty this cover is for me. But this is supposed to be a historical fiction that's set in Paris around World War II, like between World War I and World War II. But I found out recently that there's supposed to be this divine twist as well, because the narrator is actually the Greek goddess Aphrodite, which I'm kind of like, why is this like Greek goddess narrating a historical fiction that's set during World War II? Like the timelines don't even coincide, you know what I mean? So I'm just so curious by this, and I'm also reading this for book club, so I need to get onto this book as soon as possible. All the book club people have been loving this book so far, so I am so intrigued. I need to get to reading so I can be on the same bandwagon as them and understand what they're talking about. So definitely cannot wait to read this as soon as possible. The next book that I got is one that I got mainly because it has been talked about and raved about, and I think it was one of the books that has just been so popular all over social media that I couldn't help but get it, and that is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. And honestly, I don't know anything about this book other than the fact that it's a historical fiction. It's set in 1969, and it's supposed to be like a coming of age story, but there's also supposed to be some sort of like murder in it, but it's not a thriller mystery at any means. It's supposed to be just like a subplot, I guess, and everyone has loved this book so immensely that I obviously was just like, well, why not? And here we are. The next book that I got is Ace of Shades by Amanda Foody. I got this mainly because a lot of other booktubers have been reading this recently and have been really, really enjoying it. A lot of them actually had this on their like best books of 2018 list, so I was curious, and the paperback finally came out, so I was like, well, I don't have to invest that much, so I figured why not. So all I know about this book is that it follows a girl called N, who was raised and trained as a proper young lady, but then one day her mother goes missing and she ends up following her mother's trail to the City of Sin, where apparently no one comes out uncorrupted. She only has one lead, and that is the name Levi Glazier? But apparently Levi was not the gentleman that she had assumed that he was. Instead, he's a con man. And I guess the two of them just kind of go on this journey, adventure possibly, to find out what happened to her mother, kind of save Levi's like investment scheme that he was running and was apparently being revealed soon. So I don't know, I really don't know what to expect from this book, but I've heard good things, like a lot of good things actually, so I have pretty high expectations for this one. And the last book that I got from Barnes & Noble is Two Can Keep a Secret by Karen M. McManus. I got this book because I really, really liked the first one that she wrote, One of Us is Lying, so I figured why not. But this is not a sequel, which is kind of confusing actually, because you would think that one of us is lying and then two of us, like two can keep a secret, like 1, 2. I don't know, maybe the third one will be like a third or something, you know? But they're not a sequel, they're not related at all actually. So this book follows a girl called Ellery who moved to Echo Ridge, which is basically small town America. And 5 years ago, the homecoming queen was murdered and no one really knows what happened. I think it was an unsolved case. And 5 years later, basically present day, someone declares open season on homecoming and tries to make it as dangerous as it was 5 years ago. And then a girl goes missing. So I am so intrigued. I mean, she does a really good job with kind of keeping the suspense and revealing like little plots by little plots, and you're always kept on your toes, because that's how I felt with the first book. So I am very intrigued by this one and cannot wait to see if this will live up to the first book. The next few books that I got were from publishers as well as publicity agencies. The first one is The Bone Tremor by Brianna Shields. I'm just so excited for this book because this book just has a lot of magic, there's seers involved, there's a lot of fates and destinies, and this book just sounds so fascinating to me. And there's a quote right here that says, "Tomorrow my future will be decided by my dead grand's finger bones. It's how my whole life has been determined, with bones and blood and snapping flames." So this writing just seems so vivid and I am so intrigued by this book, and we'll see guys. This one comes out in May 21st. The next book that I got is Refraction by Naomi Hughes. This is a YA sci-fi novel, maybe dystopian as well. This book basically follows the fact that there was a spaceship that was destroyed over Earth a year ago, and this deadly fog and some sort of darkness emerged from the mirrors. And not only does the fog now cover most of the Earth, but apparently killed millions. And there's only 3 remaining safe havens left, and of course all reflective services are illegal. And the book follows a guy called Marty who is a distributor for this illegal reflective services, until he's caught by the mayor's son, who apparently is far from clean. So the punishment for the both of them is exile. And now they're sent to one of the many abandoned cities that is overrun by fog. And the two of them basically discover that there's this horrifying secret and the truth behind what really happened, and that they had to save the world basically. And I'm so fascinated by this book and this premise. I am just the fact that some fog came out from mirrors and basically killed a bunch of people. Like I've never heard of that before. So this book sounds very original and I'm so interested in reading and finding out this book for myself. The next book that I got is The House Children by Heidi Danielle. So I am actually so fascinated about this book because this is actually based on the real events of Ireland's infamous industrial school, which I'd never even heard of before. And that's what I like best about historical fiction, just kind of learning something new and events that happened that you weren't even aware of. For example, like the Radium Girls, for example. I mean, that was nonfiction, but still, you know, the concept still stands here. So yeah, I'm just very curious about this book and definitely can't wait to read this soon. The next book that I got is The Things She's Seen by Abelin and Ezekiel Qualmulina. I have no idea how to pronounce that name. I am so sorry. This is a very short book. It's basically about the fact that this girl, her name is Beth, she died and her father is the only one who can hear and see her since the accident. But her accident was only the beginning and now they have a mystery to solve. So anyways, I'm just really curious about this book because I'm not the biggest fan of short stories, and this book is only like less than 200 pages, so it's definitely a short story. So I don't know. I really don't know what to expect. I haven't heard of this book. They just sent it to me, so we'll see how this goes, guys. Then the last book that I got from publishers is Little Darlings by Melody Golding. I am so interested in this book. This book sounds so good. So this book is definitely like a mystery thriller novel, but it has some elements of like folklore and something with like Grimm's fairy tales and stuff like that. So I'm so intrigued by that. So this book follows a new mother called Lauren Tranter who just gave birth. And no one believes her when she told them that this woman tried to come into the night to basically take away her own babies and replace them with her own creatures. Everyone believes that she's just imagining things, until one day at a park, something happens, her babies disappear, and they're found unharmed. Everyone's like celebrating, but the thing is, she knows that these babies are not hers. So this is definitely some sort of like modern like take on the changeling myth, which I am so fascinated by. So I'm so intrigued by this book, and a lot of people have been raving about this book online as well, so definitely cannot wait to pick this up soon. Then of course I got some more books from Book Outlet. The first one is Traitor to the Throne by Alwyn Hamilton. This is book 2 of the Rebel of the Sands trilogy or series. Is it a trilogy? I don't know actually. But this is definitely a series that I think is kind of underhyped, but those who have read it have been raving about it nonstop. And honestly, I saw the cover. It looks gorgeous. It's a YA fantasy novel and I was like, yes, sign me up. So this is obviously book 2, so I don't really want to say anything to spoil anything, but the first book follows like magic, there's like mythical beasts involved. Like I said, it's a fantasy novel and I'm just so intrigued by the series in general. I'm pretty sure I should put counter just how many times I said the word intrigue, guys. Like so many times in this video already. I can't think of another word right now. I'm just so tired. So regardless, I'm so excited for this book and definitely can't wait to pick this up soon. The next book that I got is The Dollhouse by Fiona Davis. Now that I'm looking at this cover, something about this girl or this woman just does not seem right to me. I think they did some really botched up Photoshop here because I don't think this position is feasible at all. Like, I don't know. Anyways, whatever about the cover. So this book is set in 1950s in New York City, and it talks about this like glamorous Barbizon hotel for women, where it's like a generation of aspiring models, secretaries, etc. They live side by side while attempting to claw their way to a fairy tale success. And on the flip side, so apparently there's like dual timelines here, by the way. It follows a present day journalist who is consumed with uncovering this dark secret of this hotel's past. So I'm just really curious to find out what really happened. Apparently over here there's mentioned something about like a deadly skirmish with a hotel maid, so I'm definitely curious to see what happened there as well. So we'll see, guys. I mean, I love historical fiction, as you can tell right now, and definitely curious and interested about this book. The next book that I got is Letters to the Lost by Bridget Kemmerer. I mostly got this book mainly because of the author herself. I read a lot of her books recently, Curse of Dark and Lonely, which I really liked, as well as the Elemental series, which I also really liked as well. So when I saw this book, a lot of people seem to really like her. I think this is one of her first few books that she's written, so I was curious to find out if I would like it as well, but I bought it mostly because I've liked her previous books. So apparently this book follows two teenagers, Juliet and Declan, and they fall in love without ever meeting each other. And so I guess what happens is that Juliet's mother passed away and she's writing to her mother, and that's the only way she can cope with her grief. And I guess Declan, for whatever reason, somehow gets one of these letters and writes back. And this somehow sparks this anonymous like pen pal relationship. So this book just seems to be about love, loss, grief, etc. And honestly, I have really high expectations for this book because I read her other books, like I said already, and I really enjoyed them. So I'm really excited for this one. So the next book that I got is Unclaimed Baggage by Jen Dahl. This is a YA contemporary. It came out last year, I believe, and I've heard some really good things about this book as well. It seems to be like a very lighthearted contemporary novel where it follows three teenagers. Their names are Nell, Doris, and Grant, and it kind of just talks about like friendship and finding like true friendships. So I'm also just in the mood right now for just some lighthearted reads, and I feel like this one definitely fits the bill. Then the last book that I got from Book Outlet, which is also my second to last book from this book haul video, is Check Please by Ngozi Ukazu. I hope we can pronounce that name correctly, but honestly, I'm not usually the type of person to grab graphic novels. It's just not really my thing here, but I've heard so many good things about this book, and honestly this book looks like it's really high quality and the graphics look really nice as well, so I was curious to see if the book lives up to its hype. It's also supposed to be adorable and has an excellent message about acceptance. So with that being said, I was like, sure, why not? It was on Book Outlet, it was on sale, so check please. So the last and final book that I got, and I was incorrect earlier in saying that that was all the publicity, like publisher books that was sent over, because the last one was also from a publicity agency, and that is the Wizardnard series. And this one actually stood out to me because it's supposed to be by Kobe Bryant as well, and it was also written by Wesley King, and it's supposed to be a sports fantasy novel about basketball. And the idea, I just never even thought about sports and fantasy being combined. Like, I don't know any books that has the two elements, and it was supposed to be created and written by Kobe Bryant, so I was like, why not check it out? So I'm also really loving the cover just because it's velvety. It's actually like really velvety here, and it looks so pretty, and the edges are sprayed, so I was like, sure. So very excited for this one. So that's it, guys. Those are all the books that I received in the month of March. This video I have spent like the past like 3 hours filming, but I've also taken a lot of breaks here and there because it was very exhausting, guys. So exhausting. But anyways, let me know down below if you have read any of the books that I picked up this past month. If you wanted to read which books are on your TBR, let me know down below as well. And if you have read them, did you like them, did you not like them, let me know down below as well. But as always, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe down below, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!